Would you please welcome Muneeb Ali, CEO of Trust Machines, to the stage with a round of applause.
Hi everyone, excited to be here. So today I'm going to basically go over the opportunity for Bitcoin L2s and why they are really important for growing a Bitcoin economy around it, right? And then I'll focus on like one specific project, which is a decentralized Bitcoin peg that we are working on at Trust Machines. So first of all, I think I like to have this mental model of Bitcoin is like almost like a glacier. We see like a ton of value on top, and that's BTC, the asset, and the kind of things that you can do with Bitcoin today. But there is actually a huge unlock that's kind of like sitting invisible to us, and that is the type of stuff you could do with Bitcoin if Bitcoin was more programmable, if Bitcoin was moving around into various layers. I think people have experienced that with Lightning as one example. Like Lightning is a Bitcoin L2. There are a couple of others out there like Liquid, RSK, Stacks, a project that I co-created. And I think people have experienced it a little bit, but they haven't seen the full extent of what's possible. And so I started in Bitcoin around 2013. And during that time, there was a very clear thesis that a bunch of these experiments that are happening outside of Bitcoin, they will eventually make their way back to Bitcoin. And I think we're seeing like some evidence of that now, almost like 10 years later. So if you look at the blockchains outside of Bitcoin, like Ethereum, Solana, yes, they're more experimental, they're more centralized in certain ways, but there are interesting applications like stablecoins, for example, that have come up from that world. They're super useful. You can trade them against your assets in a decentralized way. And they're also liquidity protocols. There are so many Bitcoiner friends that I have, and they have this use case where they don't want to sell their Bitcoin. They would rather put it in some sort of a contract and take a loan in a decentralized way in a stable coin against their Bitcoin, right? And that is not possible natively on the Bitcoin L1 because Bitcoin L1 is very simple, it's very durable, it's designed for different things. But you can do these things on other chains outside of Bitcoin, or you can actually have these applications as Bitcoin L2s. And I think the Bitcoin L2 space is, in my view, the biggest unlock that we can have in terms of growing the Bitcoin economy. So just like a comparison, Ethereum is roughly between $250 billion of capital, and the L2 market on Ethereum is roughly 50 to 60 billion. And there's a lot of capital that is actively deployed in liquidity pools. Yes, there are some use cases that Bitcoiners are probably not interested in, but there are use cases that a bunch of Bitcoiners are interested in as well. And you can bring that to Bitcoin. Whereas on the Bitcoin L2 side, depends on how you measure it, but the entire Bitcoin L2 space is roughly like $2 billion, probably less than that, right? And there isn't a lot of capital that's actively being deployed in these things. So I think that's the market opportunity because we believe Bitcoin is the best asset. Bitcoin is the most decentralized, most durable thing, and it's going to become the reserve currency of the world. And I think making Bitcoin more programmable, making Bitcoin so that it can actually be used in all sorts of interesting applications is a very, very big opportunity. So how does that connect with Ordinals? Like that's a very interesting thing. So I mentioned that there have been some Bitcoin L2s that have been around for the past couple of years, but realistically, the Bitcoin L1 itself wasn't getting enough use for people to even feel the pain that we need Bitcoin L2s, right? And then Ordinals happened. So for people who are not familiar with what they are, although I'm pretty sure a lot of you already know what Ordinals are, they are almost like a byproduct of Taproot, which was the latest upgrade that went live on the Bitcoin L1, and they enable on-chain NFTs, right? So the image is on-chain, and it's almost like started off as a fun little thing, but there seems to be a lot of actual user demand for these things. And what happened was that because of this new activity, the gas fees or transaction fees on the Bitcoin L1 started going up, which is a very, very important property, right? Like we know that we have roughly like 10 to 12 years before the Bitcoin rewards actually start going down a lot. And that's sort of like the time frame that we have in which the transaction fees need to become meaningful enough that the security of the Bitcoin network and the revenue for miners can actually be sustained. And this was the first time that we saw that because of interest in things like ordinals and other assets that were being defined, we saw that there was more Bitcoin being spent in transaction fees, even for a few blocks, than the Coinbase rewards themselves. And I think that's a very, very clear data point that there is demand for these things, and Bitcoin's security budget is going to be fine, right? Like there will always be demand for Bitcoin's block space, given it's the most durable thing out there. So when you're putting something on Bitcoin, it sort of like becomes indestructible, right? And you know it's going to live on forever. So the spikes in fees that you see over here, I know that there are a lot of Bitcoiners who feel that this is sort of like, you know, spam, and this is disrupting the use of Bitcoin for important things like payments in developing regions and so on. But I think the point over here is that if Bitcoin is successful and it goes to 1 billion people, this will be the norm, right? Regardless of things like NFTs, regardless of things like other applications that actually get built, this is the direction we're heading in, right? So if we get a stress test right now where there is a clear market data and people are feeling the pain that they had to pay like $20, $30 in transaction fees to just get a basic Bitcoin L1 transaction in, I think that becomes almost like a wake-up call to the entire Bitcoin community that we need to work on better Bitcoin L2s, because that's the only sort of like future. And I think there's lots of agreement on that. Liquid is a Bitcoin L2, RSK is a Bitcoin L2, the project that I work on, Stacks, is a Bitcoin L2. And I think a lot of these people, they sort of like share sort of like the same vision that Bitcoin is eventually going to be a settlement layer. You wouldn't be doing transaction on Bitcoin L1 most of the time. A lot of the Lightning community shares that vision, that they want to do cheap transactions, cheap payments in the Lightning L2 and not on L1, right? Whereas if you look at what's going on Ethereum, I think we as a community should admit that over the last 3-4 years, the dev ecosystem or infrastructure outside of Bitcoin, especially in the Ethereum ecosystem, has actually matured a lot. If you look at the L2s on Ethereum, they are much more mature than what's going on the Bitcoin side. And I think that's fine. You can take some of the learnings that have already happened in that space and connect it back to Bitcoin, start building better L2s, and get ready for this world where, you know, Bitcoin fees are going to be high for a very, very long time. So given this kind of like context and background in mind, the work that we are focusing on at Trust Machine is effectively trying to design a decentralized way of moving your Bitcoin from L1 to L2, and doing that in a manner that the L2 is completely programmable. Meaning that whatever application you can build on Ethereum or Solana, you can actually also build it on a Bitcoin L2, right? So the vision then becomes that, can I just easily move my BTC to L2 where it's faster, like because L2s can have faster blocks than the Bitcoin 10 to 30-minute block time, and it could be cheaper. It will be much cheaper because that block space is much cheaper than Bitcoin L1. And most important thing is that Bitcoin this way becomes fully programmable, meaning that if you want to build a decentralized exchange, you can do that. If you want to build a liquidity pool or basically take a loan in stable coins against your Bitcoin, you can do that. And you can do that natively very close to Bitcoin in a Bitcoin L2. And doing it in a decentralized way is the key, right? So right now there are a bunch of these pegs that are out there that are live, but most of them tend to rely on federations, right? Which is one model, that's great, but I think we can explore others as well. Like, can we have some sort of a different setup where there's a much more decentralized group of signers that can come in and they're actually doing the signatures for how your BTC is coming back to the L1. So taking it from L1 to L2 is actually the easy part. Like, that's relatively straightforward from a technical perspective. Most of the complexity is around taking BTC from L2 back to L1. And I think that's where the decentralized group of signers that we are working with SBTC plays in. So how does that work? The way it works is that it's economic security, because Bitcoin actually does not have the opcodes, at least for now, where Bitcoin can actually verify that BTC is moving back from L2 to L1. And I think there's enough interest in things like rollups that in the next like 4 to 5 years, we will probably get there. I think we'll probably get the opcodes like either op stark verify or op snark verify, and then you can have like proper L2s that are rollup based, and only the Bitcoin L1 decides that yes, this is a valid transfer of BTC from L2 to L1. But until we know that it will take a while for us to make any changes to Bitcoin, until you do that, the theoretical next best thing you can do is that you can have economically secured peg where people are actually locking capital. So in this case, they lock STX capital on the Stacks L2, and they have an economic incentive because they're earning rewards for performing this work. So this is very similar to how Bitcoin miners earn rewards, right? Like they have an economic incentive to earn these rewards and perform the work, and these signers are able to do that where they get BTC rewards for performing the work, and the work that they're doing is that whenever there's a request from a user that I want to take my BTC from the L2 back to L1, they would sign that, and it's a very high threshold level, meaning that if we get sophisticated signers like custodians or exchanges and lots of users that are decentralized around the world, and they all have an economic interest in performing this function, then it becomes a very viable sort of a system where there can be easy flow of Bitcoin between L1 and L2. So in general, like I'll give you a little bit about the Stacks L2 as well, like why we focus on that. The way it works is that it has reorg resistance, or at least the next version that's coming out later this year, where for someone to actually fork the Stacks L2, they would have to fork Bitcoin. And that's a great property to have, right? Because Bitcoin already has such a high security budget, and we can just like piggyback on it and make a L2 that is as hard to reorg as Bitcoin L1. And I think some of the upcoming rollups, like sovereign rollups, they also work in a similar manner. So I wouldn't go into too much details of like technically how that works. There's a research paper that we published recently, and I'll encourage people to go and read that. But basically, I'll try to explain what the user experience is going to look like. So one interesting thing that happened recently was because of Ordinals, there are a lot of web Bitcoin wallets as well. So imagine this is like MetaMask for Bitcoin. So things like Xverse or the Hero wallet, you can go and try them out. They really look and feel like modern web wallets. And you can have your BTC in the web wallet. And when SBTC goes live, it will be as simple as like you put your Bitcoin in the Bitcoin wallet, and you click a button, and it goes from L1 to L2. So it goes from being BTC to SBTC. And then once it's SBTC, it's fully programmable, meaning you can deploy it into a contract, you can take a stablecoin loan, any functionality that is available on these other chains, they can come directly to the Bitcoin ecosystem. And I think that's a pretty amazing opportunity. And similarly, on the way back, the user could just say, hey, I'm done using this, and I want to take my Bitcoin back to L1. So I think users can have a mental model that your Bitcoin on BTC L1 is kind of like your cold storage. And these L2s can be like a hot wallet where you want to play around with things, you want to get a loan or whatever action you want to perform. Once you're done doing that, you can issue the peg out, and it'll go back to Bitcoin L1 to your cold storage. And I think the sets of opportunities here are really, really interesting. I'll just go through some of them. We know that there are a lot of Bitcoiners who actually like and support privacy chains like Monero and so on. You could have a Bitcoin L2. You can actually just have a smart contract on Bitcoin L2, where once you move your BTC into the L2, you can deploy it into a ZK-based privacy smart contract and have full privacy. So you don't need to, I think the good thing about innovating in Bitcoin layers and L2s is that you don't need to change the L1. And I think that's a very, very great property. So your Bitcoin basically goes into the privacy contract, and you can withdraw it almost as fresh UTXOs back to the L1. And I think that's a use case that a lot of Bitcoiners who care about their privacy, who care about decentralization would agree. And even simple things like we know that a lot of BTC actually trades on centralized exchanges. Like we have BTC, the best, most decentralized asset, and then we deploy it on centralized exchanges that sometimes just go bust. And with solutions like these, if you ever want to swap from BTC to a stablecoin or want to trade, you can just do that in a fully decentralized way just from your wallet. You would never have to send your BTC to centralized exchanges again. And I think those types of use cases do resonate with a lot of Bitcoiners, and that's why we are actually seeing a bunch of interest in this. And there's already a very healthy ecosystem. Like in the Stacks L2, there are more than 30 companies, tons of builders who actually jumped onto the Ordinals opportunity as well and built wallets, built indexers, built explorers, and so on. And I think having this healthy developer culture and ecosystem is equally as important, because the more we build broadly in the Bitcoin ecosystem, the better it is. So in general, SBDC, in my view, is a very critical work, because having a decentralized way of moving BTC in and out of L2s is probably the most important problem that we could be working on. And you can go and learn more about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.